Good morning, noon, or night, wherever and whenever you are listening. You are listening to The Shift. I'm your host. My name is Doug McKenty. This is episode 22 of The Shift, being recorded on December 21st, 2017. If you like what you're listening to, think about becoming a patron. That's patreon.com/The Shift. If you want more information, go to my Facebook page at The Shift with Doug McKenty. Join the conversation on Twitter at DMcKenty, or for my archives and other information, check out the webpage at www.theshiftnow.com. My guest on the show today is Satanic ritual abuse survivor Jay Parker, host of Matrix Warriors, as well as the Center Path radio programs. After living much of his adult life believing he was from a seriously dysfunctional family, a girlfriend stumbled upon his trigger word, which allowed Jay access to memories deeply buried, revealing a childhood replete with ritual abuse and trauma-based mind control programming. He awoke to the recollection that his parents were members of a multi-generational Luciferian cult dating back thousands of years to pre-biblical times. Since coming to these realizations, Jay has spent his time cultivating consciousness, learning to heal, and educating himself and others about the presence of this Luciferian energy and those who control it for nefarious ends. He worked with partner Mark Passio to convene an annual Free Your Mind conference in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Jay, thanks for being on the program, and thank you for helping to make the shift. How's it going today, Jay?
Well, good, Doug. Lots going on in the world. We're definitely in the photonic belt, and the caca is hitting the fan.
Right? Yeah, things are changing pretty fast right now, aren't they?
Well, they have to.
Yeah.
If we're to survive as a species, we need a definite change in mentation. We're in deep trouble with what the globalists, Illuminati, have planned for the human race, the transhumanism and the extermination of 80% of the population. A lot of people in the world are saying we've got to put an end to them. And I'm just one part in this giant machine of blowback. Mm-hmm. And there's many SRA survivors coming out now on Twitter and on Facebook and on the web talking about what I went through as a child and what millions of children go through in this country.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've done the last couple of episodes. I did an episode about pedophilia a few weeks ago. Last week, I was on with Janice Barcelo. I think you did an interview with her about birth trauma. And I've just been getting more and more into this, this traumatic-based mind control. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was having a hard time. Not that he didn't believe, but, one of the things that he said was, well, wouldn't there be more people coming out and saying that they have had this experience? And I said, well, there are people who are coming out and saying that they've had this experience. They're just not getting airtime, or when they talk, you don't believe them. So it's like the information is out there, but people are still just, if they haven't lifted the veil yet, they're just not paying attention to what's really going on. So can you tell a little bit about your story and how you came to the realization that you had been victimized in this way as a child and what that awakening meant for you?
Well, I guess simply stated, my father was ninth generation Illuminati, and my mother was, her heritage was, she was a member of the Amalekite tribe from the Middle East, and she traced her mother to daughter witchcraft heritage back 3,000 years. Mm-hmm. And this is the, David Icke has written a great book for anyone to read called The Biggest Secret. And this book talks about the true history of our world and the manipulation by the archontic forces to make us a slave race. And terrible situation, and humanity is now between a rock and a hard place. And if it doesn't fight back hard, it will be exterminated for all intents and purposes. Right. We're talking about people who wish to microchip and enslave humanity, a total digital currency The state will be God, and Lucifer will be the religion. Make no doubt about it.
One of the things that I did want to talk to you about, because I know like your mom's lineage goes back before the Bible, so a lot of times we talk about this stuff in terms of the Christian mythology, like Luciferianism or Satanism, but it's really even older than that. Can you get into some, like what is the energy that we're dealing with? I know a lot of times we call it Luciferianism, but is it old? I mean, what is that? What is Lucifer, or what is that energy that you're talking about? I mean, getting back to the pre-Christian way of looking at it, or where it originally came from. Like you mentioned, the archons, or the archontic. I've heard it described in that language as well, which is a little bit different than the Christian mythology.
A lot of different words for the same force.
Right.
A lot of different gods for the same force.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, basically, I was given, in the first 6 years of life, monarch mind control. And I rebelled at 7 years old when they killed my best friend. And we went to the police. I grew up in Arden, Delaware, a deep state protected Illuminati pedophile village. 90% dark occult pedophiles, and 10% non-cult. And there were some Christians living down the street. So when my best friend was raped and he went septic and died, I basically went to the Christians, told them everything I knew about the cult, and they went to the police, and the police said, we can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because in the 1930s, according to my mother, the police tried to stop the cult in Arden, Delaware, and 3 policemen were murdered in short order, and the cult got a message to the police, do you want some more? And the police said, we're done.
Right.
So we have now a change with Donald Trump as president. I gotta turn this off. There we go. We have a change now with Donald Trump as president, because he's the first non-cult puppet in the presidency in a long time. Going back, I would say since Teddy Roosevelt. Mm-hmm. Teddy Roosevelt was the first real Illuminati president. They killed McKinley and put him in.
Right. You don't see Kennedy. You see Kennedy as being a part of it as well.
Well, the Kennedy family is a Illuminati bloodline.
Right.
And after Kennedy's father, Joseph, died, he and Bobby decided to strike out on their own, since they no longer had a handler keeping their programming in place. And so they decided that they would be America first. And, well, we know where that ended. But essentially, if you look at what Donald Trump is doing and what Jack Kennedy did, there's a lot of parallels. The Democrats don't admit this. In fact, the Democratic Party of today has nothing in common with the Democratic Party of Jack Kennedy. Mm-hmm. Total opposites. But it's a long totalitarian tiptoe with these people. They generationally have a plan, and it's passed down generation to generation. We have, in our country, 40 million dark occult pedophile mass murderers. A lot of people don't want to believe that. But we have 11 million Christians that go to church 2 times a week, Wednesday and Sunday, and are adepts of Christianity, a religion that came from the Middle East 2,000 years ago. This is accepted, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, we have more Christians that are holiday Christians, and of course, technically, we call ourselves a Christian nation, a Christian-leaning nation, but in adepts, in people that actually dedicate their lives 24/7, it's probably about 11%. So, where did that come from? The Middle East 2,000 years ago. The dark occult religion of Molech and Andros, the Marquis of Hell, which is the deity of the Hellion pantheon that is worshipped in Rose Valley, is a particularly bloody, ruthless deity. He supposedly rules 40 legions of demons in hell. I've seen him. I've had him conjured up in my presence as a child. And then when I got triggered in 2001 by a woman I was dating who was a witch. And she simply wanted to get into my programming because everyone knew I was a monarch. And I worked for Illuminati businessmen all my life, working for pennies on a dollar. All you had to do was throw the right hand signal and bingo, you had a slave. So, not a good life. But I'm here to talk about, we're talking about the shift that's going on right now. It's because we're in the photonic belt, the equator of the galaxy. This is a construct. This is all a mental construct from the collective subconscious of humanity. We broadcast into the divine morphic field, the 52 waveform field of almost infinite possibility and energy. It's almost infinitely dense. It's to the 29th power, and there's 52 waveforms of energy. It is a intelligent field, the morphic field, and it is the habitat of the Godhead or Goddess, whatever you prefer. To put a sexuality or to put a cultural stamp on the Godhead is one of the genius moves that the dark occult did in divide and conquer strategy.
Right, that's
funny. It is our birthright to walk with the divine as co-creators of this experience, and that's the first thing that they determined to take away from us. So they have these religious systems, whether whatever they are, that basically they'll tell you 80% truth, but then they'll give you 20% that keeps you from actually manifesting your divine nature. And there are many people now today who have rejected status quo religion and are pushing through with some of the modern spiritual techniques that are now available. And they're getting quite good results. So the revolution and shift is not going to be televised. You're not going to see it on CIA media.
Right.
You might see some of it, of course, on the web that's not sanctioned by the government, but you have to learn who to listen to. One of the first things you need in this world is to ask yourself, who am I listening to get my worldview? And if you're listening to people who don't have your best interests in heart, you better change who you're listening to.
Well, this is one thing maybe we should get into, is this dichotomy, this master-slave dichotomy. One of the things that I've really been thinking a lot about lately is that the people, let's say on our level, in the slave caste, are really taught this materialistic worldview, like, this Newtonian physics, everything is matter. The vast majority of people aren't given this multi-generational perspective where there might be spirit beings or energies that are living, that we can connect to. Even though, one of the things that I've kind of realized is that all indigenous cultures understand this. They have ways of communicating with these other dimensional beings and things like that. But the vast majority of people in this that I would say have been colonized, maybe I like to use that term, they don't know that part of the reality, and so it's difficult to kind of like break through. It's difficult for the average person who's been raised, and I think raised in this same kind of trauma-based mind control situation. That's another thing I've been thinking a lot about lately, is how you know, like my interview with Janice talking about coming into the world in trauma with the birth trauma, but then the school system, which is very authoritarian and is essentially traumatizing children into, you know, getting away from their own imagination and their own learning experience and forcing them into this kind of hierarchical structure. There's just so many ways in which they use this trauma-based programming to get people to only see the world in this materialistic lens. And how can, I mean, I guess we just keep talking about it, but to wake people up to the energetic universe, that there really is this other worldview that some people have woken up to and that the elite class knows about. They know about this and they use it all the time and they use it against us. And it's because we're ignorant of it, I think, that we're slaves to it, you know?
Well, the ignorance is going away, but the ignorance is remaining.
Right.
There are many people that don't want to hear about geoengineering and chemtrails. They don't want to hear about fluoride in the water. They don't want to hear any of the things that are going on with the ongoing eugenics program by the dark occult. As I mentioned, the 40 million dark occult, they started their religion pre-Atlantean times. My father called himself an Atlantean warlock on many occasions in cult. So I have to say we're looking at, of course, Atlantis fell in the great cataclysm of 9600 BC, of which Allen and Delaire have written 3 books about, and a shocking 1,000 years of different cataclysms physically on the planet, which put the human race in shock and destroyed a worldwide high technology civilization. My mother said Atlantis was a cruel, warlike, mind-controlled civilization that basically was like the island of Dr. Moreau because of their chimera genetics and doing the genetic manipulation on animals and humans. And in one day and one night, the thing dropped like a rock. And so here we are. We at 9,600 BC, a cometary fragments or asteroids have hit the polar ice caps and caused just a massive flood. It's like taking super hydrogen bombs and dropping them right on the ice caps. It really, really caused a flood. In fact, the pyramid at Giza, known as Cheops, has a watermark 2/3 of the way up the pyramid. And that should wake you up to the extent of the flooding. A lot of people died. Very few people lived. Of the ones that survived, you had basically indigenous people who respected nature, respected women, lived in for the most part, a matriarchy, because the ancient religions, pre-dark occult manipulation, were all centered around the earth is your mother, it's nurturing, we're here to love and respect one another and to grow in knowledge and consciousness. And then, of course, you change that to what Constantine brought in 335 AD, 25 AD, 325 AD at the Council of Nicaea, which basically was Satanism light. If you look at the Apocrypha, the 35 books of the Bible that were thrown away by Constantine, look at the doctrine in that and compare it to what Constantine's scribes wrote. It's different enough that you actually get a total spiritual change. And people are waking up to that. John Lash has an excellent book called Not in His Image. And Not in His Image I recommend to anyone that really wants to understand Western spirituality, because he talks about the Gnostic age, the building of Christianity as the state religion, and the predator-prey relationship that we all have to this corrupt system. we're all in Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great book. I'd really actually love to get him on the program just to talk about it, because that's where, even he goes into the Gnostic belief system about what, we're talking about as a Luciferian system, but he talks about the archons overtaking, and this archontic energy overtaking the goddess Sophia. And that's basically what indigenous Europe believed. I mean, they saw it coming. And then the Romans came in and they destroyed them all. And then, 500 years later or 1,000 years later, burned all the witches that maybe, the witches, quote unquote, that still had, I think, a lot of that knowledge. I mean, they really destroyed that knowledge, so that now, so many people who are continuing in that colonization process are just completely ignorant of what used to be common knowledge. I think, in pre-Christian Europe, pre-Roman Europe, right? So,
yes,
trying to bring that knowledge back, I think, is a big part of at least what I'm trying to do with the show. I think what you're trying to do, and having had your experience, it's pretty profound to see the actual effects. And let's talk a little bit more about the actual, like the mind control and the way that it works. I mean, this trauma-based mind control, what actually happened to you when you were younger, and what they're trying to do. I mean, they're enslaving humanity with traumatic experience. I mean, what's the function of it? What's going on? It seems to me like disassociating us from our feelings, from our empathy, from our emotions, and really kind of, turning us all into robots that can be used, that can be used for whatever they want to use us for.
Well, they don't need us anymore. Yeah. In 1963, my parents told me that the rank and file Illuminati were being thrown under the bus with the rest of humanity, because at that time they had gotten to the place of recovering their Atlantean technology. And so they no longer needed the masses of humanity to push the wheels of industry. They had the knowledge that they needed, and they were ready to scale back and conquer the world for themselves. But there's roughly 200,000 people that call all the shots on this planet, and they're dark occult. If you read The Biggest Secret, if you read Not in His Image, you'll get a good spiritual understanding of the war that has been going on this planet since the cataclysm of 9600 BC. I basically teach people about the new energy psychology of EFT, Psych-K, MDR, about how you can actually reprogram your subconscious. Trauma-based mind control is basically from in vitro electrical shock to 7 years old, 6 years old. They stop the actual trauma, raping, and drugging when the child gets a third brainwave pattern. When you get your third brainwave pattern, you start with delta and theta, and then you get alpha. And once you get alpha, you're able to understand what's going on and differentiate knowledge coming in through your five senses. And also, it imprints much better for your memory. So they tend to stop torturing their dark occult children at 6 and 7 years old, because they don't want them to remember how their synaptic pathways were warped by torture and drugging and rape. And so, because then you'd be like, hey, my parents are real SOBs.
Right.
Well, you don't want that. You want people to say, well, this is our way, this is our religion. What the Illuminati minions are, basically, you have the slave population, or I'd like to say the inmates in the jail, and that's 90% of the human race, maybe 85. According to Stuart Swerlow, he says there's 15% dark occult in the world today. And they're all in the positions of power. And That's why they invented government. That's how a small amount of people can control the vast majority. If you build systems of obedience and then slowly indoctrinate and mind control people to be obedient to authority, then the 10% can rule the 90% forever, because they're taught in the schools, don't ask questions. I mean, how many of us know that when you raised your hand in class, the teacher looked at you like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're asking a question." So it's all very subtle. It comes through the culture, and as Terence McKenna said, culture is not your friend.
Right.
Culture is your enemy. And so as long as you're in the programmable state of delta and theta brainwave patterns, you cannot differentiate any information coming into your subconscious. Your subconscious is being built while you're pre 6 years old. And so that subconscious runs 95% of your life. Okay? Most people think the 5% of their conscious minds is the totality of who they are, not realizing the big secret that the Illuminati know, that it's the subconscious that relegates what effect you're going to have on the field. The 5% conscious mind, oh, they don't care if you're a rabid Alex Jones fan. They don't care if you're Thomas Jefferson. As long as that enculturalization program that they put in there, in this society, everybody gets a sophistic, satanic worldview. It's just the way it is. Children are placed in front of televisions for hours on end, where there are massive amounts of government and dark occult subliminals, both audio and visual. The food you're receiving, another thing to keep your vibration down. The vaccination is now it's nothing but a chemical lobotomy program, because higher consciousnesses that made a commitment to be on the earth in this crucial time to fight this battle here. And that's what we're in. We're in a war for survival. Make no mistake about it. With Fukushima, with the geoengineering, with 40% of our ozone layer gone because of HARP. Every time they use HARP to move the jet stream, they push a little more ozone layer out. And so now our sunlight is 60% UVB when it should be 5%. These are, and UVC, which should stop at 100,000 feet in the atmosphere, is now hitting the ground. And that's even a more deadly UV radiation. So, I mean, in California, they are actually spraying sunscreen on the walnut trees to stop them from getting fried.
Oh, wow.
It's not funny. If you look at what's going on in the ecology alone, between Fukushima has killed the Pacific. I mean, it really has.
Right.
I mean, look at what's going on in the coastline of California.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I live right here, and we're watching it happen. We don't have an abalone season this year. You know, they've had the starfish wasting disease for the last 5 years, trying to figure out what's going on, and nobody's talking about Fukushima. Like, maybe that's having something to do with it. But
you think?
Yeah, right.
China syndrome meltdowns. The worst possible scenario of a plutonium and uranium reactor. These were MOX reactors. So there's not only the radioactive stuff, there's tons of plutonium. And then, of course, when the thing blew up, all of the fuel rods scattered all over the place. I mean, it's a disaster 1,000 times more than what they're saying. But as the water creeps underneath, and this happens on every coastline, whether there's a river or not, groundwater goes from high landmass to into the ocean. It seeps under the ground and kind of gets that balance. Well, underneath Fukushima, where this radiation is burrowing down to the center of the Earth, these cores that are missing, the natural flow of water gravitating to the ocean, the 300 to 500 tons of water every day that go through that area of Fukushima, where the reactors were. I mean, basically, you're talking about some really toxic, high radiation level material. And there were 52 types of kelp in Vancouver, and now there's only 3. There's no more sardines. The abalone's gone. Mm-hmm. I mean, wake up and smell the coffee. A guy has done some videos of the devastation north of Vancouver, where the tidal ponds there and the small islands were just full of birds and mussels and shellfish. It's all gone. But the mainstream media doesn't say a thing about it, so no one knows it's happening.
This, just to go back to the whole mind control phenomenon, I've really become more and more aware just in the last couple of years, really, even just dealing in my own community with how people really are brainwashed. I mean, everybody's talking about climate change, but nobody's talking about the toxicity levels all over the planet. You've talked a little bit in the past about the fact that we're going through the 6th mass extinction. Pretty serious, mostly because of, aluminum and mercury and chemicals from chemical plants and petrochemical corporations all over the planet, dumping crap and killing everything. And nobody's talking about this stuff. And it's like, how can everybody be so dense? I mean, I had a realization about 9/11. You talk about 9/11 with people. There's no plane at the Pentagon. It's like that. How can people, it's smoke and mirrors. It's like, how can they not see that? And how can they not see there was no plane at Shanksville? There's no pictures of any plane. There's eyewitness accounts of, I didn't see a plane. I was standing right there. There's no plane. And yet everybody thinks there was a plane. It's, how can you convince entire populations without mind control, And so many people are influenced by it. It's culture-wide. The whole culture is actually under some kind of spell. I mean, it's fascinating. And they can't think. They can't look at Fukushima and go, my God, this is terrible. Let's do something about it,
And what's really shocking is there's actually, technologically, there are some remedies to deal with Fukushima. But the main thing is, and let's get into this discussion because we're talking about what we need to do to actually shift from this satanic Luciferian mindset back to one of nurture and care. And basically, I recommend to anyone the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton. His book, Biology of Belief, is a must-read because you need to understand that we are epigenetic creatures. We are not ruled by our DNA. We are the rulers of our DNA. So whatever you think and feel, that 44 million bits of information go into the morphic field, the morphogenic field, the divine field, the cosmic field, the Godhead, whatever you want to call it. And that 44 million bits of information, 4 million from your conscious mind, the thoughts you can think about, the ideas that you can have, 4 million bits of information into the field every second. And the subconscious, it's 40 million bits of information. And that subconscious is the hard drive that your culture gave you, that your parents, your school, whatever you were subjected to before you got your third brainwave pattern and were able to differentiate information and make a decision for yourself whether you were going to believe something or not. I mean, for the first 6 years of life, all the information coming at you is the Word of God. and it goes right into the subconscious, and it becomes the Word of God. And I'm not joking. And that runs 95% of your life. So there are many people who say, how come I can't change these habits? Well, if it's in your subconscious, you're going to obey your subconscious no matter what the 5% of your conscious mind decides. Now, of course, there is wiggle room for willpower and things like that, because we do have willpower, and you can just gut it up and decide, I'm not going to smoke cigarettes anymore, or I'm not going to do this or that anymore, or I'm going to exercise, whatever. You do have willpower, and you can change yourself that way. It's much easier to go into the subconscious processor and change the program. And, all I'm saying, okay, so we have this violence against children society. I mean, 800,000 children disappear in America alone every year. And a lot of them go into rape and torture rooms of the Illuminati. And, spend about 2 years in a cage being raped by different pedophile groups. And then when you're totally burnt out, they take you to a organ harvesting factory and harvest your organs. So one child abducted, okay, with good pedophile Illuminati roots, can be worth $250,000 to the handler per year. So you can make $500,000 abducting one 3-year-old. So, this is big money.
Right.
So don't think it ain't going on, because there are people out there that'll kill your mother for a nickel. You better believe it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard. One of the things I wanted you to address, actually, is what is, like, I started looking into this, and I'm doing the research, and of course, the vast majority of people, what comes up on Google right away is satanic panic. And everybody just, the mainstream media is always trying to cover this stuff, brush it under the rug, pretend like it's not going on. Can you address that whole, the period of the 80s and the 90s where it seemed like things were starting to bubble to the surface, and then how, was it just an effective campaign by the mainstream media and the controllers to just to do that? Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, the two people who invented the false memory syndrome, okay, were out of the University of Pennsylvania, and they actually got busted writing in a Danish pedophile journal.
Oh, wow. And the false memory system is what they used to say the kids were lying. They didn't really have these experiences.
They actually went after the therapists and the people who were saying this had happened to them. So these are, when it comes to the Illuminati and these Satanists, what are we dealing with here? Well, there's the Earth's natural energy and the consciousness that comes from the goddess, Godhead. There is a intelligence in the field that is loving, that cares for us. In fact, if you really do the physiological research, like Dr. Joe Dispenza, you know that the field is actually interdicting to keep us alive second by second, because we do not possess the ability to do the physiological things that happen second by second in our chemical matrix. We don't have the ability to do it. There's just trillions of things going on. We're literally reacting at the speed of light. But I would recommend, to get the shift going, you have to clean up your subconscious and write out the kind of world you want, the kind of attitude you want in your heart and mind, and start doing EFT. I found that EFT is the best. I used it to deprogram from the 7 years of ritual abuse I went through. Very effective. It's something that predators and victims can use to deprogram. Okay?
Right.
And I can say about, what the Illuminati do to their children. They shock them electrically with the high voltage DC current in vitro while they're still in the mother's womb to basically warp the synaptic pathways of the mind and get a person into the R complex of the mind.
Wow.
All these Luciferians live in the R complex because they have been subjected to torture in the programmable state. Okay? That's why they're going to lose this battle, because those of us who have just been culturally indoctrinated, okay, who have been mind controlled through the television, media, schools, and religions, whatever, okay, the enculturalization mind control, which I call, MK Ultra Light, all right?
Right.
Because the bottom line is no care, okay? The bottom line is materialism.
Yeah.
The bottom line is no stewardship of the ecology, okay? We're talking about just basically being a taker and never a giver, all right? Now, when you break away because you look at 9/11 and you go, well, the building turned to dust. Right. How did that happen?
Yeah.
I mean, because let's face it, folks, where did all the furniture go?
Yeah.
Where are all the file cabinets? Okay? If it did pancake, okay, then the pile should be about 15 to 20 stories high. The pile at 9/11 is basically a story and a half high. And there's no damage to the basements except modern damage. So it's not like it all fell into the basements. Okay? Let's get that clear.
Yeah, crazy.
Everybody wants to look at that information of the true 9/11 story, because what it was the dark occultists saying, look, we have this molecular disintegration technology now. We can de-bond the material bonds in molecules and just turn it to dust. And that's what they had. They're using the same technology in the fires in California. And, great forest fire burns the houses but leaves the trees and bushes.
Right. Well, this is what's amazing about it, and this is where this whole mind control, brainwashing thing starts to make sense when you're like, why can't people see that the building turned to dust? Why can't people see that there's chemtrails in the sky? I've had, conversations with people. They're like, oh, those aren't, what are you talking about? There's no such thing as chemtrails. Prove it to me that there's chemtrails. And I'm like, look at them, like, how can you not see what's right in front of your face? I mean, that's what, it's not a logical conversation. It's not like you're talking, you don't need to use sophistry to discover some truth here. You just have to be awake and look at it and go, my God, how do we wake people up? I want to talk about the solutions, and I want to get into the EFT a little bit deeper, but I have one more question about the mind control first, because what I want to see in your research and your understanding, what is the connection between like the Luciferian cult, like the multi-generational Illuminati cult that you experienced growing up as a child, and then how are these same techniques suddenly showing up in the government as an MK Ultra program or as a Project Monarch program? I mean, are these people, are they the same people? Are they working together? It seems like the very same trauma-based programming that the cult has known about from this 3,000-year lineage of doing this to people, suddenly manifests itself in these government programs. So can you talk about that link there?
Well, as far as we know, the intelligence services in America have been doing mind control experimentation since the 40s. So basically, the government, the people that own the world, the owners of the world, as George Carlin would say, all right, the owners the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, DuPonts, they're all dark occult. They're all Luciferian Satanists. Now, there's plenty of different brotherhoods, secret societies, and deities in hell to worship. But let me just say, give you a little background to that, is because the people that run the governments are the rich and billionaires and trillionaires. They're dark occultists, so they're going to use their influence in government to advance their mind control technology, both for the 90% that are not cult that they need to control, but also to advance the mind control of their own people. And so when World War II ended and the Nazi paperclip scientists came over, we divided the Nazi scientists 50-50 between the Russians and the Americans, and we got Joseph Mengele here, and we got other mind control specialists and biological warfare specialists. Lovely people.
Yeah.
But they decided that they would take some of the Nazi MK Ultra mind control technology, because it was a new twist on an old theme. It was more scientific. It seemed to be an improvement over the ancient Molech mind control. So they formed a synergy of the ancient dark occult mind control and the modern Nazi mind control.
Right.
And that's why the Project Monarch, which 3 million children were put through in the 50s and 60s, basically is called MK Ultra. It's Mind Control Ultra. Mm-hmm. And when you go through your entire programmable state, being raped, tortured, drugged, horrific human sacrifice rituals, basically you're toast. Because it forces you into permanently into the R complex of the mind, which is flight or fight. Mm-hmm. Great place if you want people that have no critical thinking, because you're not in the limbic system where your emotions are, and you're not in the frontal cortex where the higher thoughts of creative learning and philosophy come from. So you're basically beaten down to the lowest common denominator of the human brain. And my father said when Kennedy got killed that the Illuminati did this. We're sitting, me and my brothers and my mother, watching TV, and it's a funeral of Jack Kennedy. And my father said, we did this. It's called Death of a King. It's a trauma ritual.
Right.
And Death of a King is a large trauma ritual for a nation. Whereas 9/11, again, a large trauma ritual for a nation. Make no mistake about it. And I want to say these few things that are so important that my mother told me. The most important thing to the Illuminati is the collective subconscious. Okay, we're all knit together in like a World Wide Web. Okay, all our hearts and feelings, all our thoughts of the human race, all 7.5 billion of us, are knit together. We don't understand, but when I have a thought or feeling, it's broadcast all the way around the world to every other human being. Mm-hmm. We don't understand this, but the physicists and some of the brain scientists are realizing that this is what the system is that we live in. And Joe Dispenza is doing brain mapping technology work. He's a great scientist. He's written some fantastic books about meditation and the effects of intention. But you have to know Bruce Lipton's work if you want to change the paradigm for the good. You have to know Joe Dispenza's work. Bottom line, you can go to my website, thecenterpath, www.weebly.com. I've got quite a few videos there on consciousness growth by Lipton, Dispenza, Greg Braden, and I have a lot of eye-opening, as I say, gargling with sewage material. If you understand the attack the human race and the planet is under by these psychopaths, okay, and you understand that you want to change the paradigm back to one of life and love, then you need to do EFT or Psyche. You need to reprogram your subconscious. You can say, well, I feel fine, Jay. I'm a positive person. I'm a loving person. Your subconscious was given to you by the same people who started the war in Iraq.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Who, they don't even need a reason to start a war. There used to be a thing called the just war theory of Christianity. You didn't go to war unless somebody was messing with you and you had to defend yourself.
Right.
You don't need to do that today. You have the Mockingbird media. Project Mockingbird is a CIA control of the media. It's been known about since the 70s, okay? And they've controlled the media, and they are controlling the mainstream media today. They hate Trump. Trump is not a member of a secret society. He's not a globalist. And right now, we're in a war. We're in a war in Washington, D.C., between the Marxists and globalists. And there's also Nazi globalists. We call them neocons, okay? But when I grew up in Arden, there were only two political mentations. Democrat, which is Fabian socialist controlled, which is communism. And then you had the Republicans, who were Nazis.
Yeah, corporate control.
Which is socialism also. The joke that the Nazis are right-wing and the communists are left-wing is not true. If you compare Nazi government, the way they did things with the Soviet Union, it's almost identical. And it was called the National Socialist Party, okay? So stop that with the left-right thing that Nazis are leftists. No, the bankers invented socialism in the 1800s. They invented communism in the 1800s, all right, where the state is God and people are slaves, okay? And if you don't want to be a slave and be microchipped, and once we get the microchip, that's it. Then you cannot buy or sell unless you have a credit from the government, okay? Total control. And then they'll start doing the George Godstones, which calls for the elimination of everyone on the planet except 500 million people. And that's what the George Godstones say. They're in granite. They put them up like 20 years ago, and they're not joking. Okay?
Right.
And, I'm saying to people, I know that this shift is going on because at Bruce Lipton, one of his talks was at Uplift 2012. And he's got some newer stuff, but he does his talk, and people are cheering about the epigenetic nature of human beings, that our thoughts and minds control our genetic expression, and you can heal yourself through intention and meditation. Joe Dispenza has written a book called You Are the Placebo. The placebo effect cures 40% of people. All right? Bottom line, every time. Yet, the mainstream Rockefeller allopathic medical community won't study it.
Right.
I mean, you got a bottom line 40% cure rate, but we're not studying that. Can't make any money off of that.
Yeah.
I mean, let's talk about cannabis, right? 1938, they made cannabis illegal. change its name to marijuana, right? It'll make people go crazy and kill. All right, well, what did they know in 1947 when they did some cannabis studies? The government knew that cannabis cures cancer in 1947. 1975, Richard Nixon, wanting a new bureaucracy and some more Hitlerian control, declares the war on drugs. He has 5 cannabis studies done. They all come back and say cannabis cures cancer, and it's really good for your immune system.
Yeah, right.
It produces brain cells. It's a miracle drug. Oh, let's keep banning it.
Yeah.
And the government has a patent on the curative properties of THC. It's held by the Department of Health and Human Services. Now, they're also tied into the UN's schedule of drugs, where cannabis is ranked as a #1 schedule drug. Top of the line, right there with heroin. Has no medicinal uses, just deadly, not good for you at all. So, look at the cognitive dissonance in this. They're holding a patent for the curative properties of THC, while they're also telling you it has no curative properties. 17.5 million people die needlessly in this world every year from cancer. All right, 17.5 million people die because Big Pharma cannot make money off of pure cannabis oil. If you ingest a gram of 95% essential oil of cannabis indica every day for about 45 days, 50 days, you can cure 95% of all cancers. Rick Simpson, who is someone you should look up, is an advocate of cannabis oil treatment, and he's getting 95% cure rates using cannabis oil. And may I say also that the cure rate for chemotherapy, surgery, and radiation is 3% over 5 years. 3%. Plus, it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, right. and the doctors are making money off of it.
Well, the doctors actually receive the chemo drugs from the pharmaceutical companies wholesale. And then they, the doctors, the oncologists, act like a pharmacist and put whatever markup that they want to charge the customer. So the doctors are getting paid to be doctors, and they're also getting paid to be pharmacists. Do you think that they have a vested interest in keeping chemotherapy? You better believe they do.
Yeah, I woke up to that. I was doing some research into the history of chemotherapy and then found out that chemotherapy came right after World War I, when they made mustard gas illegal. All the defense contractors were trying to figure out what to do with their mustard gas plants, and they figured out, oh, well, if we tweak it a little bit, we can turn it into this chemotherapy stuff and call it a cure for cancer. It's just a tweak on mustard gas, which was, you know, a weapon of mass destruction.
It's like aspartame. How did aspartame start? Well, that sweetener started as a biological weapon. It started as a weapon, and it didn't work as a weapon. It wasn't quick enough. But when you ingest aspartame or NutraSweet, whatever they call it, I think they call it amino sweet now. They keep changing the name every 10 years because people find out that it's poison. But it turns to wood alcohol when ingested.
Yeah.
Now, when you take wood alcohol into your system over a long time, you get many debilitating problems, plus you go blind. Good stuff.
It's just unbelievable, Jay. And it does, I mean, it does all dovetail back into this mind control. It's like, how can people not see it? I mean, we talked about 9/11. You know, we can talk about chemotherapy or aspartame. We haven't, I mean, fluoride, vaccines, you know, things like circumcision. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on about why are we doing this? And when you try to explain to people, I mean, you get called anti-science by people when you're trying to explain to them that there's neurotoxins in vaccines, and that's not good for your body. You know, you don't want to inject a neurotoxin into a baby. And they're just like, oh, you're anti-science, you don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, no, well, wait a minute, you know, I do know what I'm talking about. They can't even, you know, they can't even have a conversation about it. Like, they can't look at the evidence. They can't see what's right in front of their face. And that's when it comes back to the mind control. You've got to know that you're dealing with brainwashing. And just one of the things that really, you know, as I was looking at your work, it's just fascinating that there's like this 10%, maybe 15% of the population that go through this hardcore mind control. I mean, you know, the pedophilia, the rape, the electroshock, you know, the whole 9 yards, the Monarch programming, the MK Ultra program, things like that. But then there's the other 80, 90% of the population that's almost like what you might call a soft kill. Like from the very beginning, they're going through the birth trauma in the medical centers. You know, if you're a boy, you get circumcised. Then you get thrown, you know, you get disassociated from your mother. You're not allowed to develop that family bond. You get thrown into a school situation at 5 years old where you're not allowed to be creative, where, you know, you're taught to walk in a line. You're punished if you don't act the way you want to act. You're thrown in front of the television from a super young age. I mean, you know, and then you're bombarded, as you're saying, by these other things. I think, you know, 9/11 or the Kennedy assassination, like you're talking about, these cultural traumatic experiences. I think maybe the Las Vegas massacre or something like Sandy Hook. I mean, these are more of these like soft kill, if you will, this for the ingestion of the 80% or 90% that aren't really going through the hardcore stuff. You know, still everybody is participating to some extent in this kind of trauma-based programming that's just making it to where they can't see this stuff that's right in front of their face. So we've been talking for almost an hour now. Let's keep going for another 10 or 15 minutes or so. But try to get to talking about healing, because you've touched on it a little bit, but I want it, because we talk about so much of this, you know, it gets so heavy, because it is so heavy what they're doing, but there is a way to heal.
We're in trouble, Doug.
Yeah.
I mean, the human race has got some issues that are just unbelievable.
Right.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Really, we're being sprayed like cockroaches because you want to block out the sun because of global warming. Yeah. And then you realize that we actually have a problem now because they've damaged the ozone layer. 40% is gone from the use of HAARP because they want to use weather as a weapon. And you know, it's true. You got to go to geoengineeringwatch.org and look at some of the stuff. But, I mean, Pakistan refused to put a chemtrail geoengineering airport in. The Americans said, hey, we want to fly these planes out of this airport here. And the Pakistanis said, oh, you want to spray poison in the sky? Screw you. Well, then the Pakistanis had a once in 500-year flood event, and the Americans got their airport.
Right. Wow.
Go figure.
Yeah.
And it happened in Thailand also, where they refused the planes, and then they gave them a flood, and then the Thailand people, government, you know, folded. But what I'm saying here, and they're spraying biologicals, cancer viruses, Conicorm Institute is doing research. They're taking planes up and actually taking samples. But there's all kinds of nanoparticles. Morgellons disease is been found in the fibrous stuff that they're spraying. But let's talk about the soft mind control that society goes through, which I call inculturalization. What's the bottom line that you're always being taught. Okay? In Japan, they say the nail that sticks up the highest gets hit first. Okay?
Right.
One that raises their hand gets the attention of the masters first. All right? You have been slowly taught not to ask questions, to go along to get along, to be an obeyer, of authority. Well, if you can't tell by now that the authorities in this world, for instance, just last week, they discovered that $21 trillion was misspent by the federal government that they were not allowed to spend.
Yeah.
In the last 10 years under Obama and Bush, the federal government spent $21 million off budget. Okay? They were not allocated that money by Congress. They just went on a spending spree.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's more than crazy. It's insane. The
right.
corruption. That's why they hate Donald Trump so much, because he wants to stop this corruption. Now, I'm not a huge Trump fan, but I am saying this. If the New World Order globalists, whether they're Nazis or whether they're Marxists, if the new global government gets done, forget about it. We're done, because that is a Luciferian, pedophile, human-sacrificing construct. The UN was founded by the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. The UN in New York is sitting on land donated by John D. Rockefeller. If you study history, you will know the truth. I would recommend you go to Infowars.com. I really don't like the way they are now with all the yay Trump, because I like what some of the stuff Trump's doing, but there's no way I'm ever going to trust a politician.
Right.
What are you,
yeah.
But let's go on. What can we do to change the paradigm and heal the planet?
Yeah.
Every time you do EFT and remove negativity from your own subconscious, it's lightening up the whole field. The field is getting a different message. The dark occult, the 10% that abduct children, torture and rape children, that torture and rape of prepubescent children, those children in the first 6 years of life are very close to the divine field, because they have yet to strike out on their own and get a third brainwave pattern. They're really, in a way, subconscious. Okay? Now, they're very close to the field. So when you torture them and scare them, that psychic energy coming off their good, unprogrammed hearts, because they're almost pure human, and we're a hybrid divine animal matrix. That's what we are. And these little kids are closer to the divine matrix. So when you torture them, you send terror and shock waves into the natural energy field of the planet, and you keep people in Stockholm Syndrome and fear. Okay? And my mother said the most important thing to the Illuminati is the collective subconscious. So clean your subconscious up. Bruce Lipton, Dr. Joe Dispenza will teach you how to do it. You can go to emofree.com and learn the gold standard of EFT tapping. Go to YouTube, punch in EFT, millions of videos. There are 10 million practicing EFT teachers in the world today. It's the biggest change in psychology in 1,000 years, and it's straight from the Godhead. Tapping on pressure points,
right,
and focusing on a thought, you can reprogram your subconscious, which makes up 95% of your uh, relationship to the field. And what you broadcast from your heart and mind to the field, the 44 million bits of information per second, comes back to you in your life experience like a boomerang, like that.
Mm-hmm.
So clean up your subconscious and you'll change your experience.
So what does EFT stand for? And could you get a little bit into the actual practice of it? I mean, and I have a background in doing Tai Chi, actually. I wanted to let you know, because I know that, you're talking about different pressure points. So you're talking about the Jing-Lo system from traditional Chinese medicine. And, just as an aside, I mean, basically what we're doing in Tai Chi all the time is trying to make sure that, we're not in that fight or flight mode. I mean, this is this is what they want. They want us to be always, we call it like yang qi or your qi go, you get up, you get scared and you want to run away, right? I mean, and so your qi is up, and we're always, the meditation practice is to sync it and to relax the energy so that you can actually think, with your critical mind, like you're talking about, instead of just being constantly in this disassociated state where you can't focus on what's actually happening in front of you. And ultimately, for the martial art aspect of it and the self-defense aspect of it, you can't even really do the martial art unless your chi is centered. If your chi is up, you can't defend yourself. You literally can't defend yourself because, it's just easy to get pushed over when all your energy is way up high. I can get into a lot of that, but it's just interesting to me that the EFT is connected into this as well, because I think it is blending a lot of this more ancient wisdom, the traditional Chinese medicine, the chakra system from yoga. I mean, your internal energy system. Like, this is the other part of it where the Illuminati or the mind control just wants us to be stuck in this materialist world, and it's actually in the energetic field. If we can heal our energetic field, then we can start to function as powerful individuals that can work against this, this Luciferian force.
Well, that's why they're so scared right now. They've lost control of the federal government because of Trump getting in, and also I have to say there is a consciousness shift going on because we are in the fifth sun of the Mayan cosmology. Mm-hmm. And that's a big deal. Also, with the ley line system, some of your people might know about this. The dark occult Illuminati, according to my mother, and she was a mind control programmer for the DuPont family. She was no Chicken Little. She destroyed the DuPont heir, John DuPont, and read what he did in committing murder. My mother did that to him. It was a plot to take his money by other members of his family. I have it on my website. You can go to my interviews and learn all kinds of stuff about the Illuminati and the dark occult. But let's keep it simple. The only thing you can really control in this world is yourself. That's the only thing you realistically really have some control over.
Right.
So if you start broadcasting peace and freedom and tap out the blind obedience to authority, what happens is you're freeing up your natural, true human spirituality. And one person that has rejected the mind control of this society, the enculturalization, is broadcasting at a higher frequency than 100 sleepwalkers. And I look at people, they don't care about learning, don't care about one another or the planet. These are people who are literally sleepwalking in a trance. There is a waveform called a lily wave. It's in every electrical system in your house. Dean Radin talks about this. It is an entrainment wave. When you drink fluoride, you are dumbing yourself down and making yourself docile. Okay, you need to get a water filter. And there's so many things that you can do. And my website has got quite a bit of information that'll help you protect yourself. Stop drinking fluoride water, stop eating GMOs. There's a lot on my website, YouTube's you can watch to actually learn how to protect yourself. But in the case of emotional freedom technique, it's recommended by Dr. Bruce Lipton above any other of the new energy psychology modalities. I'll tell you how powerful it is. I had blood ritual trauma done to my subconscious as a child. Human sacrifice. Animal sacrifice. I mean, how much emotional damage do you think you would have if your babysitter slit open a cat and shoved your face in it? Just for fun. That's fun, right? I could tell you things that would turn your hair white. When EFT was invented, Roger Callahan of California was a psychologist that started the ball rolling. Gary Craig with EFT took it to a whole nother level. Gary Craig at emofree.com is where you need to go. And I have some links on my website, thecenterpath.weebly.com. But the thing is, this woman went to Roger Callahan. 6 years she was going to psychiatrists and psychologists trying to recover from a deathly morbid fear of water. I mean, it was debilitating. 6 years she was paying out the nose to these experts. Roger Callahan tapped on her pressure point at the collarbone and told her to describe her fear of water. After 30 seconds of doing that, she ran into Roger Callahan's backyard because he had his office at his house, because he had a wing on his house where his psychiatric office was, and he had a pool in the backyard. And she kicked her shoes off and stuck her feet in the pool and was kicking in the water and laughing. 30 seconds cured a lifelong, 6 years he was trying to get cured. And that's the power of EFT. I'm not saying everybody's going to get a 5-minute miracle. I'm just saying you want a tool in your toolbox to take your divine power back. This is it. Okay? And let me tell you, I don't do it enough. And the universe is slapping me upside the head, saying, hey, you got more work to do.
Yeah.
In fact, recently, I wrote out all my traumas, Doug, pages of them. And I tapped on them, I'd say when I found out about EFT, about 2006. And I literally changed my whole life. I got rid of my alters, my, multiple personality. I reintegrated. I was happy again. Wonderful, wonderful story. Now the universe is telling me, get that old list out and do it again. And I'm like, well, I already did it. And they said, the person in 2006 did it. But now your knowledge and your heart and mind are in a totally different place. And, there might be some residue there or something, but they want me to tap on it again, the Godhead. And I'm thinking, yeah, well, that kind of makes sense because tapping should be a lifelong process. Just like learning, you used to be curious until you went to school and they beat it out of you.
Right. Yeah.
So, Dr. Joe Dispenza, How to Break the Habit of Being Yourself, and You Are the Placebo. He's got guided meditations. Go to his website, joedispenza.com. It'll blow you away. There is a revolution in psychology and spirituality going on right now. And it's coming straight from the Godhead. And I'm telling you, I'm not getting stuck hanging on to this negative satanic programming, because I'm telling you, they're messing with the originator of all things, on this holodeck, in this situation.
Right.
And let me tell you, when the genius, intelligent, loving quantum field has had it and it's got to make a change, I want to be on the side of the Godhead that has quantum ability. I don't want to be on the wrong side. And I'm warning everyone out there, you really need to clean up your mentation. Because I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm telling you, the Illuminati said for a long time, this dark hand thing, and it was actually out on the web about 10 years ago. Oh, we're going to make the world so bad that, people will cry out for God and we'll finally get God to do something. You know what I mean? Which, of course, is the exact opposite of true spirituality. You teach truth and you grow that way. These people are insane. Of course they are, because they were tortured in the first 6 years of their lives. And I just want to say also, where's this consciousness of pedophilia and war, and where's it coming from? My mother told me that it's from the dimension right next to our dimension. And NASA says there's 11 dimensions. Let me tell you, there could be parallel universes. There's a lot we don't know. But one thing I do know for sure, that the archonic spiritual consciousness is not from our dimension. It's not Earth. It's not from Earth. And how they contacted these entities, or whether they invaded like a hack into our world, I don't know. I just know this, that the 10 to 15% who have been following these dark entities, and it has a super consciousness, it knows a lot more than we do. I mean, our planet's 4.5 billion years old. The universe and galaxy, we estimate, is 12.5 old. So if it takes 4.5 billion years to develop a sentient Homo sapiens species like us, okay, that can develop a high civilization, the universe has got a 4.5 billion year advance on us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So do you think there might be some stuff out there with the knowledge base to run circles around us?
Right.
Yeah, I think so. It might be. And if you look at true cosmology, you'll find that they're picking up bacteria in meteorites and all kinds of stuff. So the universe is teeming with life. It's teeming with life. And what I'm saying is, it's time. We're not going to. We've had 7 ages before this, possibly 6 or 7 ages. Atlantean age, pyramid building age, giant age, Lemuria, Mu, the Krishna age. My mother said it probably 5 major ages where we build up to a high technology and we got smacked down. We're in the 5th sun. I just want to get this before we close. Okay. We're in the 5th sun now. We're getting protection from higher dimensionals. We're getting protection from ETs. We're not going back to pointy stick world. We're not going to have a nuclear war. We're going to have to face our shadow selves, and we're going to have to grow up spiritually. Sorry, suckers, but the party's over. You've got to grow up now. Stop pointing fingers and start pointing inward.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about this before, and maybe we could close by talking about this just a little bit, which is working on your consciousness. So many of us we're because of that programming, we're programmed to get that job, go to school, go to college, get the job, make the salary, pay your taxes, and then die. And one of the things I've heard you talk about is, we got to get out of that cycle, and people have to start, like you said, looking inward and working on their consciousness. The external stuff is just external stuff, but the more that we can heal our energy and the more that we can raise our awareness, that's where the fundamental change is going to happen here.
Absolutely, because the Illuminati, now that's why they spend trillions of dollars in shaping culture. That's why they control the school system. Okay? When the schools were first introduced in Massachusetts in 1836, the people rioted because they knew it was a government control, a government plan for mind control. They were going to teach our kids. No, parents used to teach our kids.
Yeah.
And when the government, and you can see it now, look at the social justice warriors and look at the millennials. Because they were not raised by parents and did not have correct bonding in the first 6 years of life, they have no ability to resist someone that does not agree with them totally. They're flawed human beings because they were not raised by a loving parent. And this is why we have a system that takes children from their parents. When you're thrown in daycare in the first year of life, you're really being destroyed emotionally. And Stefan Molyneux talks about this. He's a great philosopher. But I was in my kitchen in 2006 when I was doing massive amounts of EFT, and I had this, epiphany, and it was simply from the divine field, and it said, you are here to learn and grow in consciousness. That's the meaning of life. And it put that as the first thing in your life, your consciousness growth and learning. Go to my website. You can learn. That website will point you in the right direction, because my researchers page, there's links to 35 different researchers of all kinds of research. Physics, dark occult, nature, the morphogenic field. Good stuff. Turn your TV off, for God's sakes. If you watch television, you are put into a mild hypnotic state by the flicker rate of the TV, and then the government's pumping in subliminals, audio, and visual. You don't need that. And all I have to say is, with that mind control programming that TV does, you really see, for the most part, people's attitudes, they're basically repeating. They're repeaters of other people's information, which is fine because that's how we learn. Other people teach us. But there's a difference when you're self-taught by going to the web and reading books, because you'll read several different people's opinions about one subject, and you'll be able to understand it better. Whereas when it comes out of the TV, you'll notice, and Conan O'Brien has done quite a few videos of this, where every TV newscast is saying the exact same thing.
Right. Yeah.
Because it all comes out of CBS in New York and is disseminated. It's all talking points and programming.
Well, we're looking at almost an hour and a half here, so I think we probably better call it. That's a pretty long one for me, but I'm glad that we were able to get a lot of this information out. Will you give out your website again and any other information you want people to have where they can learn more? I highly recommend that people do check out the website, because there is a lot of great information, all the books and all the videos that you really need to not only wake yourself up to what's really going on, but also learn how to heal yourself from a lot of this deep trauma. It is all there in one place. So, check this out. I recommend it.
There's so many things that you can do that really doesn't impinge on your life. to affect consciousness and affect the morphogenic field. The most important thing is your subconscious broadcast into the field, for you personally and for the entire planet and species. But thecenterpath.weebly.com is my website. And I'm also on Facebook. And you can find me, Jay Parker, in Philadelphia. My picture is me sitting in front of the pyramid at Cheops. And I'm also on Twitter, Real J Parker 1. And Real J and Parker are capitalized. And, not the whole word capitalized, just the first word letter. But I'm having a lot of fun on Twitter. I'm upsetting some people.
Yeah, well, this information it's pretty far out, but I'm starting to really get a grasp of it and starting to understand it, and I can't believe how much it starts to coalesce and make a lot of sense. The way that it's just a trauma-based. We live in a culture that's a trauma-based system. And there's a handful of people who are masters at it, and they're the ones that are on the top of the pyramid, and they're inflicting it on the rest of us. And, we just got to get a critical mass going so people can wake up and we can get them to stop. So we can start, a love-based system. There's a better way.
You really nailed it there in summation, Doug. And when you wake up and start loving yourself to the point where you learn energy psychology and start to do the meditations and get the information of Dr. Joe Dispenza in your life, and you start to push against your ego, which basically is the programming you got from your culture. Your subconscious is the hard drive of your computer, your body computer. And you didn't program it. So I know you all have a good 5% of your mind, your conscious mind. You say, well, I'm not that bad a person. But I tell you, you could really do the planet a big favor here by learning energy psychology and, write out a wish list and do some EFT tapping on it and send that energy constantly in the 40 million bits of information from your subconscious into the field. Tap on freedom. Tap on anarchy. Whatever you're into, Hey, tap on people buying your products. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
But, you're broadcasting all the time. And that's why we have a change, because the net changed people's minds. That's what we're seeing right now. They've changed their minds. There's a lot of people doing deep psychological and spiritual cleansing and healing. And, people like to cut up the New Age sometimes, but I'm saying, hey, there's a lot of tappers in the New Age, and there's a lot of meditators, and we need more. So...
yeah, I hear you. Well, that's a great place to kind of end it. I hope people do check out your stuff. Just to conclude, for my own work here, I want to remind people they could really help me out by becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/theshift. If you want to find out more about what's going on this podcast, you can go on Facebook. My Facebook page is The Shift with Doug McKenty. Contact me on Twitter at @DMcKenty, and the website is www.theshiftnow.com. All of my shows are also archived on YouTube at The Shift. You can search for The Shift with Doug McKenty and you'll find it there. So thanks to everybody for listening, and thank you so much, Jay, for being on the show and for all the work that you do. I really appreciate it, and I hope people listen to this and learn more about it.
I forgot, Doug. I also am I have a radio show on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight. All I have to say is I do 1 week of consciousness work with the Center Path, and then I do another week of, let's say, freedom fighting with Matrix Warriors. And it's a good time. So that's Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. I'm on Studio B.
All right.
So I'm glad you're doing your work, Doug. You see, if more people just get out there, you just keep pushing the truth in love, and you never know who you're going to wake up. You know, you just never know. What I talk to women and with pushing their baby carriages about the mercury and vaccines and stuff like that. And sure, I get people saying, "Go away, conspiracy nut."
Right.
But the ones that don't and take the information and take the websites and protect their children.
Yeah.
Boy, when those babies look at me, and like I can see in their spirit, they're thanking me. And you can't buy that. You can't buy that. It's priceless. And we need you to get involved. And if you don't want to be a revolutionary, you can be a revolutionary of the psychology of the world, because we're all knit together in one mind and one heart.
Yeah.
So if we lift our heart and mind up, we're going to see it in the morphogenic field, and then we're going to see it in the five senses reality that the intelligent field gives to us because we are asking for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what people don't realize. You think, why is this always happening to me? Well, because you're broadcasting for it.
Right.
It's the truth, you know?
Yeah, well, and that's the truth that these guys in the Illuminati know, and that's why they're programming us to create this reality, because that keeps them on top and it keeps us, you know, on the bottom. And so the more that we can wake people up to that reality, and the more people do wake up, and it's just, even like you're talking about, even just the act of being awake adds to the momentum of the consciousness of the planet, so that more and more people can kind of jump on this bandwagon. You don't, you know, just talking about it to your friends, or, you know, even just thinking about it and meditating yourself, it's making a difference. So I hope that people do listen to this. It
absolutely is.
Yeah.
It all begins with each one of us pitching in. Many hands make work light.
Well, there you go, Jay. I really appreciate
Doug.
it.
We'll have to do this again.
Yeah, okay, I will. We'll catch up again in a couple of months and figure out anything, I don't know, you know, anything that I can do to help.
When my new website comes out, we'll do a little thing, okay?
That sounds like a plan. Let me know.
Going to be a lot of healing information on that website.
Great.
A lot.
Great. Yeah, I know. So much of this information can get people down, and even the process of waking up, it can be very traumatic for people, you know, to find out that you've been lied to your entire life. So it's, you know, the more we can focus on healing.
Well, that's why you can't gargle with sewage 24 hours a day. You have to learn how wonderful and loving you can really be. You have to learn Joe Dispenza's work, Bruce Lipton, Kevin Trudeau. There's a lot of really good people on my website to balance out the negative and positive. And I recommend to everybody, you know, spend 10% of your time looking at the bad reality and 90% of your time pushing the spirit of divine love.
Well, there you have it. I hear you. It's important. It's important to stay on the light side of things, on the positive side, so you don't just get sucked down.
Well, it doesn't happen all the time, but the more I feel I keep telling myself that, I keep getting closer. I'm serious.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. All right, well, Jay, yeah, I gotta go. For sure. Thanks again for being on the show, and we'll keep in touch.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, have a great rest of your day.
All right.